Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire. And we have a stacked New Year's panel with all of our favorite hosts, including the wrestling's original and most acclaimed photographer, Mike Lano, and wrestling's other great attorney, especially the greatest attorney north of the U.S. border, and that is Jonathan Schwartz, and of course the illustrious and ebullient Evan Ginsberg, who also has great news about his new book that we're really excited about. So welcome everyone, and welcome to 2025. It's going to probably be a hell of a year for all of us. I myself am going to be moving locations for the first time in 12 years. I got to move up the
Canada, but you're moving to Canada, Russ?
I wish. If Jonathan would only, doing it. I do have a good friend up there in her late 80s that has offered to do an adult adoption of me, and I'm like about 50-50 on moving out there, because I don't know, man. Except for if I'm going to move there, at least I want to get in there after the winter time. Jonathan, you can tell us about what winter's like up in Toronto.
Up here it's not too bad. If we were talking Montreal or Ottawa, then you might want to think twice about it. No offense to anybody listening from Montreal, but Toronto is not bad at all. I think we actually get less snow than Buffalo does.
That's not saying a lot for a guy that lives in California. You say less snow than Buffalo. We get a lot less snow.
Oh, please! It's good. It's the seasons. It puts hair on your chest.
Yeah, my chest is hairy enough.
But I stayed at Stu and Helen's place December 15th of 1995 because it was Stu's 80th birthday and the 45th anniversary of Stampede Wrestling.
Oh, Calgary winters are brutal.
40 below when Owen Hart and his best friend at the time, his TV buddy, they were road mates. Louis Spicoli picked me up at Calgary Airport, and there was no visibility. It was just snowing, cold, but it was wonderful. So what a beautiful place that whole province is in all of Canada, which is where we had our honeymoon.
And Evan has been out there in New York.
And we went to Cope. But we're going to talk about what's with the name change. Maybe Jonathan during the show can say why his name has been shortened now from Adam Copeland to Cope.
So to hear his rationale, he basically thought that to announce the rated R superstar Adam Copeland and use his full name every time was just more than a mouthful. So he was trying to make it easier and punchier, I guess. Why that would be necessary, considering we've known he's Adam Copeland for the better part of 25 years, I don't know. I've got to say, I'm a little bit sensitive to having made two kids. It's the kind of thing that you look for how names can be manipulated. So choosing a short form that rhymes with dope or nope or grope, especially in light of recent events, I don't necessarily know as or mope, the best call.
That's why I went with James and Jane. I thought that would be hard to make fun of. I guess there's ways to make fun of any name, pretty much.
Well, wait. What's next? Calling Christian or Ratso Rizzo? You get my Midnight. What was that movie, Evan, where Dustin Hoffman?
Oh, Midnight Cowboy.
And his name is Jay Rizzo, right?
I want to know who you get for the John Voight part. Like Cowboy Bob Orton.
Yeah, he's still around for now, So I did want to, right after we did our last show, World's End, AEW World's End was on, and I wanted to get you guys' thoughts if you had a chance to see it by now.
Will Ospreay was unbelievable, and he had two great matches the same show. And that's two more than The Miz has had in the past 20 years. In one night. He had a better night than The Miz has had a career.
And I think he gave more blood than like the
blood bank.
Yeah, than a standard blood bank.
That was the opener. And I don't think I've seen blood in an opener that much since the ECW days, like the 1994 November to Remember, where there was juice in the opening match.
Yeah, I mean, we're tired.
I think the rest of the show was pretty forgettable, but those two matches, were tremendous. And Ricochet's match was very good also, but not nearly as good as Ospreay's.
I want to speak out in favor of Mercedes Moné and Chris Statlander, mainly because of Chris Statlander. I was actually really impressed with her work, and I think she's going to be an up-and-coming star in the women's division. I really think she showed a lot. I mean, that was the longest match.
TBS champion for the women.
Yes, well, whatever that means, TBS champion. I mean, my God, AEW definitely has title fatigue. We can talk about that for a little bit, but I really thought she stood out in that match. That was the longest women's match in AEW history. So, there was something to be said about that. I mean,
that was the longest pay-per-view match, male or female, in AEW so far. I don't know if that's true, but it was very good outing by Mercedes because she's often annoying, at least for myself and others on the weekly TV with the patter, and it's very WWE-like versus it doesn't seem very real, and the dancing is getting very old and annoying, but she delivers. She delivers on pay-per-views. Yeah, though she's excellent.
Yeah, they actually started cheering her for her performance. Jonathan.
I think that the star of that match was Chris Statlander. I think she's a vastly underrated talent, and I think that really when Tony Khan puts his mind to it, the AEW women offer really compelling wrestling on TV in a way that I just, for the most part, don't see in WWE because they tend to promote the same 2 or 3 people very heavily all the time. But AEW, the women's division seems to be one of those places where they've actually, whether it's people who've come up like Chris Statlander from elsewhere, or people like Tony Storm who've gone through the WWE system but didn't quite click there. Britt Baker, I think, is somewhere in between the two, but you've got a wealth of talent in the women's division there. Leaving even aside the international stars who kind of put in appearances every so often. I would love to see more of that. The other thing that I just point out is it was really nice to see Jay White, who has been criminally underused in AEW since he arrived, in a main event match. It was great to see Adam Page, who seemed to have just dropped off the face of the earth despite being a former champion, getting back into the title picture, however long that lasts. And I welcome kind of the character changes for both of them. Just me on a personal note, I would very much like to see Mox phased out of the title picture. I don't love this new version of the gimmick. I've kind of grown stale on it.
And that match was a mess.
That
match was terrible.
But I don't think it was a mess because of the challengers. I think it was a mess for 2 reasons. One, Mox is just in love with this destructive style, and Tony Khan won't tell him no. And it was a mess because much as I love Orange Cassidy and I enjoy his matches and I like his gimmick, he should not be anywhere near a main event match.
That is
and hang on one sec. And I think even worse is that this whole Mox run, I fear, is basically being set up for Darby Allin to emerge as a quote unquote legitimate contender for the AEW World Championship and ultimately to win it, which frankly, to me, that's David Arquette worthy booking. And I have nothing against Darby Allin, but 150 pounds soaking wet, half painted up like a 3rd generation photocopy of Sting. It just doesn't work for me as the flag bearer for a promotion, especially one that's trying to challenge for the #1 promotion and is currently the solid #2 promotion in the United States and has outreach, into Mexico, into Japan, and is a legitimate player on the wrestling scene.
Let me say something quickly.
Respectfully submitted.
You mentioned, Jonathan, Britt Baker, and I think she's had 3 to 4 matches, and that's it. In what, she had her injury, but 3. I don't even know if she did more than 3 last year. She had the match with Mercedes, and it was a little underwhelming for some. And she's one of those faces of the company, not just since she was the first signee and there from day one, but a true face of the company. Why are they not trying to recreate the magic with her and Thunder Rosa, for example, which was over like $1 billion? I don't get the hot shot booking, and you have these insane matches that should be strung out or not on free TV, but a pay-per-view. We'll see some stuff on free TV tomorrow night when Raw makes its debut on Netflix, and I might be going to that, hopefully. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Britt Baker. And why the dearth of Canadian performers, male and female? I can't even think right. I'm sure Jonathan will hopefully come up with some, but
Cope.
There needs to be representation from Canada.
Kenny Omega.
Jericho.
Yeah, okay, right.
2.
I know, Christian, but okay, all right. You help, because I was thinking, especially when they go into Omega's hometown, and obviously Jericho. All right, but I was just thinking, the women's side. Can any of you guys name any females from Canada? I can't really think any in AEW right now off the top of my head. And then it's Evan's turn.
I'm claiming Tony Storm is the member of the Commonwealth.
That silence says a lot right there. It says a lot. So yes, Evan, why don't you give us your thoughts?
I thought it was an excellent pay-per-view. To this day, I still find it weird when the best match comes on first. I just think it makes for a weird rhythm through the rest of the show, because the second and third and fourth match, it just doesn't touch what Ospreay and Fletcher did. So instead of the show building,
but the Okada.
Yeah, that was great, but that was at the very end of the show.
Right. So it's kind of like a sandwich.
As somebody who has sat live at AEW pay-per-views, basically that's 5 hours in. 5 hours. So unless the last match is absolutely great, you're shot by then. It doesn't matter how young or old you are. You're sitting there for 5 hours, literally 5 hours. So, it's just a weird rhythm to me, the way wrestling pay-per-views or premium live events are structured today. And it used to be, it would build towards the climax, build towards the main event. And
I can sort of see in the case with Ospreay, in the sense that they need to give him like 4 hours to recover from.
Oh yeah. That's the exception to the rule.
Match.
But even with McIntyre and CM Punk in that last match that they had, which was great, that was on first, and nothing afterwards touched it. So it's just a weird rhythm, for a show.
You know what the school of thought is now? Bully Ray, Bubba Ray Dudley says this all the time, almost on a weekly basis on Busted Open, is you start with Detroit Rock City, meaning a killer opener, and then you're supposed to end, so it doesn't matter what goes on in between the whole pay-per-view, but you end with Rock and Roll All Night.
Oh, not
because,
so,
but because he says it doesn't mean it's true. It's not true for me.
And when he backstage at all of these different, whether it's TNA or AEW or WWE, is you want a killer opening nowadays and a killer final match. But often the opener is, as everybody has said, is far more entertaining and the best match on the show, which is tough. AEW pay-per-views, not this particular one, World's End, but some prior ones, almost all the matches. You look at over the course of 5 years, and you'll be able to watch on Max, like all of the AEW pay-per-views for free if you have Max. Like if you have DirecTV, you get it free. You can watch all the old ones, and some of those pay-per-views, almost every match was awesome. So I don't know how. Well, I don't know. I can't complain when the matches are great.
Jonathan, you were about to say.
I think the challenge is kind of twofold. First off, you want a hot opener because you want to prime the crowd to respond to everything that comes after. And there are going to be points if it's a show that's being sold on more than one match, more than just the main event, there are going to be points where you want the crowd to cool down a little bit as well. I was just going to say pretty much any indie show that I've been to, the formula really seems to have changed. It's not like, 1980s WWE where you'd have like 5 or 6 preliminary matches mostly between enhancement guys. And then right before the intermission, you get like the semi-main event and then maybe another enhancement match. And then finally the main event. It's a different kind of approach to building the evening. And just to kind of comment on the Bubba Ray's point, when I even remember going to, of all things, a Meatloaf concert a number of years ago, and he started with Hot Patootie from Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is one of his more famous songs, and he finished with Paradise by the Dashboard Light, which is probably the best known of all of them. And then he came out for an encore and he did a cover of Let's Do It on the Road by John Lennon, and the crowd went mild. So I think bookending a show with your strongest material is not a bad thing.
But I'm with Evan.
He brought up Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I was lucky enough to have gone the opening event when it first came over from the UK, the Rocky Horror Picture Show in like 73, 74. Before it went to Broadway, it came to LA at the Roxy Theater, which is part of the Rainbow Room and the other club that's down the street, the Whiskey A Go Go. Yeah, Whiskey A Go Go. But the very first event of any kind wasn't a concert. It was the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Meatloaf played the character he would in the movie, as did Tim Curry as Frank Enfurter, the mad scientist, and Little Nell. They were all the originals from the London play when it was started. And Jack Nicholson's producer friend was the one that spent all the money. The famous guy brought them in. I got to be there, and Meatloaf, we never heard of the guy before, and he just killed.
I was at Meatloaf's first tour when he was doing colleges, and he was pretty much unknown, and that guy just blew the roof off the place. It was unbelievable, with Carla DeVita as the female lead. And I'm an R&B guy. I was weaned on James Brown and Al Green, and I'm not usually blown away by a white singer, and this guy was great. Oh my God, in the 70s, guy was tremendous. Showing.
Here in the Bay Area, the Rocky Horror Picture Show has, a gigantic cult status, and people are still performing it all the time, constantly.
We used to go to the midnight shows in Greenwich Village, to see, all the fans were acting out the movie. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
That started at the New Art Theater. The midnight showing with the people throwing toast and doing all that. I'd been to some of them. But the movie is not as good as the original play. If anybody can dig up the play, and I have the cast album, I had some of the cast signed, including Meatloaf, Tim Curry, Lil Nell, the guy who wrote it, who was the sort of butler, the evil butler. He was actually the guy that wrote
Riff Raff.
All of it. Yeah, Riff Raff, that character. And the music, like the opening song with the lips in the movie version, is very slow. Fiction. And
I happen to love Rocky Horror, so.
The cast album and the play itself, it's fast moving instead of the slow opener. The movie depicted, whatever. But that was almost.
I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that I agree with Evan in the sense that if you're going to have a title match, I really don't like the world's title match being the first match of the show. I really feel that you owe it to the card and you owe it to the title to build to it. To have the main event be your world title match, and that should be the final match of the show. You should build towards it. Now, the problem is when you have, 2 battle royales and and 4 8-man matches. Prior to that, you've seen like every possible angle that you get, in a 60-minute Iron Man match. Before that, then you've seen like every move you can see in the book, and you're kind of like at that point where you're like, what are you going to see in the ring that's going to surprise you or be impressive?
Sorry, but I respectfully disagree. I think that it's fair to say that applies in some cases, but I think I've mentioned it before. I think my crowning moment as a wrestling fan was I got to attend WrestleMania 18 at the Skydome here in Toronto. The main event of that show was Triple H and Chris Jericho for the World Heavyweight Championship. It was a fine match. 2 matches before, you had Hulk Hogan fighting The Rock.
Ooh.
I defy anybody who is a wrestling fan to find me a bigger reaction to a bigger match than that. Jericho and Triple H themselves admit that should have gone on last because there was no way and it wasn't necessarily a technical barn burner either. I freely acknowledge that. Dave Meltzer was not going to give that 5 stars. But in terms of an impactful wrestling match that drew in the crowd and told a story that people wanted to see, and the match that people wanted to see wound up being a little bit different than the one that they had planned out. I think titles are very important, but I don't think that they're the be all and end all, especially not now. And especially as Russ noted earlier in the program, when so many promotions have so many titles up for grabs. If you look at WWE, you want to talk about the world title. Okay, so fine. You can either have Cody Rhodes, but you can also make a compelling argument that Gunther is the world heavyweight champion. And you can't bury Gunther in the mid card, I don't think. So if you need a hot opener or if you're trying to get people's attention, the opening slot is where you would put that match, I would think.
Wasn't the Hogan wasn't really supposed to turn face, but the crowd responded. Who did that?
The 60-something thousand fans in Toronto did that. Although I have to tell you, for being there, I know the narrative that's come from WWE ever since then is that the crowd was booing the hell out of The Rock and cheering for Hogan and basically completely turned the match on them. They were cheering everybody. Sometimes you'll see face and heel trading shots and the crowd will boo and yay depending on who's hitting who. Every single move, every single sell, every glance to the audience. And I've never seen a match where the performers broke the fourth wall that much. Everything got a positive reaction, at least from where I was in the cheap seats.
That's sort of epitomized by the chant now, both these guys, which is probably one of the best chants, as opposed to "you deserve it" or "this is awesome." But both these guys, that's a lot more meaningful for
holy
me.
Shit.
And that would have been holy shit. That would have been a great chant.
I always like you're going to get your effing head kicked in.
So
let's wait. The card tomorrow, they're all main event caliber matches for Raw debuting on Netflix, and I don't know, a hot opener to a hot main event, but they're all going to be hot. So that's just a uniqueness. They're trying to really get this thing over, and I'm sure there's going to be baby boomers in my bracket, 70 and older, that are going to be upset that it's not on cable anymore and they have to learn how to stream. But any thoughts, Evan, Jonathan, Russ, on having a 2-hour plus show where everything is going to be mega?
I haven't watched Raw since 2018. I wasn't even planning on watching. So I have limited brain cells at my tender old age, and I don't want to lose too many of them.
I want to watch the CM Punk. That thing should be a big deal. And
I just watched their pay-per-views.
You just watched their pay-per-views. Well, what was the last one?
I get to watch the pay-per-views now.
What's that?
I get to watch the pay-per-views now with them moving over to Netflix.
Are they going to put all the old papers?
Add to a global audience more than you know their appearance on cable in the U.S. So that is one thing, is that, you know, we'll see what the global numbers make up for what they'll probably lose some percentage of people in the United States, like you point out, Mike, that there's going to be people that if it's not on cable, they're not going to pay for it. I don't have Netflix, and I don't intend on paying so that I can get Raw, because I agree kind of with Evan that there's
they have a lot of other. You watch the Golden Globes tonight, and Dwayne Johnson presented the opening award. You can't get bigger than that.
Guess what? I didn't watch the Golden Globes tonight, and
it's still going
on.
They interviewed him, and he brought his daughter Simone, who's in NXT, as the commissioner, the fake commissioner, but she was very eloquent on there, and that was a big deal. They gave he and her probably the longest time in the red carpet portion, and then he knocked it out of the park, you know, with the very first award. You have the biggest movie star, quote unquote, on the planet. So I don't know, but I think Netflix offers enough other content. I've never had it. I'm just like Russ, so I'm a little scared. I've tried all the other ones. Sometimes you get burned.
I'm not scared. I just can't. I mean, I'm tired of paying for everything else.
Apple Plus, for example, there's only a couple of shows. They need to get with it. Hulu's got some amazing shows. I got that just to see Only Murders in the Building.
Netflix has great comedy stand-up.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's getting to the point where you know, you pay $300 for your cable, then you got to pay, you know, another $15 a month for Netflix. You got to pay another $20 a month.
Like $7 a month for the plan with commercials. So that's the
lowest. Watching all those crummy San Francisco sports teams.
Well, they're already,
save money on your bill.
Well, that's part of the whole cable package. And if you knew how much,
get rid of all the sports channels, you'll save a fortune.
They don't offer them anyway in a la carte. You got to buy that when you buy the main cable package. So you can't even do
something
that.
to this. I want to say this to our listeners and the rest of you guys. I'm pissed. I'm going to be calling Hispanic Channel 46 Los Angeles. They were running one of the best weekly shows, the 1-hour AAA show from Mexico, the Conan books, you know, with the help of Latin Lover and some of the other guys there. And it's actually an amazing show. And the channel that's been airing it for like the last 6-7 months, it was drawing ratings, just dropped it like a hot potato. I don't understand. So if anybody gets that show, I don't know, Jonathan, if you get it up in Canada, but it is, when they do TV, it's
what
like
channel is it?
It was channel, well, it doesn't matter, but it's on a low power Hispanic channel in Los Angeles, 46, Casa, and they were airing it on Saturdays. They also air World Wrestling Council from Puerto Rico, which is like not even close. The AAA show with all those superstars is big. Alberto Del Rio is their champion, and he's having main event matches with Laredo Kid, who's like jobbing on TNA. And I go, this guy's a main eventer in AAA, you know, much bigger global promotion. Not quite sure I understand what's going on here, but the AAA show was can't miss. It's like AEW. I might complain a little bit. I never fast forward through AEW, and I never fast forward through AAA. So I'm going to bite the bullet tomorrow and finally be able to see some Adam Sandler shitty movies and good stand-up.
There are good Adam Sandler movies. There are 3 of us here who will die on that hill.
Uncut Gems is tremendous.
Yeah,
tremendous.
Uncut Gems.
He's
and
making
there was the one he
sequel.
did with Paul Thomas Anderson a few years ago, Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah, I was going to say Punch Drunk Love.
Spanglish is very good.
Yeah.
Those are theatrical. Those aren't just the pleasant comedies on Netflix. Those are theatrical.
Then again,
You were so not
Jack
invited to my that show was excellent.
But he did do
And it
Jack
was
and
filmed
Jill
here.
undoes, you know, Uncut Gems. Jack and Jill is so awful that it does, you know, undo the greatness.
De Niro's done 50 awful movies along with his classics.
Adam Sandler, a terrific movie with Paz, Hispanic lady, where she was his maid that he has.
Spanglish.
Oh,
Yeah,
man,
great.
that was an awesome.
Excellent.
That was a great. Excellent. Yep, exactly. Excellent movie. So Sandler can be great when he wants to. I think when he brings in all of his buddies from SNL, it's heartwarming that he's giving them all a job, including the Xerox copier guy. But they don't always turn out to be great movies. Other than anything Chris Rock does is usually pretty damn good. So
I'm still looking forward to Happy Gilmore 2, and I will die on that hill.
Well, you can't have a refight.
Yeah, but
with
Bob Barker.
Yeah, Bob Barker.
But just think about it. Maybe he beats up Drew Carey, which would be even better.
That'd be pretty funny. So, hey, I wanted to also mention, it wouldn't be a Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast show without mentioning somebody's noted wrestler's passing, and we do want to remember Sweet Daddy Siki, who died, in between shows, between the last show and this show, and he's more of your generation.
Jonathan, was he born because he lived for this guy was one of those pioneers. He wasn't one of the earliest African-American guys. He wasn't a Luther Lindsay, but Dory Dixon, Bobo Brazil, obviously, who's way up at the top
Thomas.
there. Sailor Thomas, yep. And Earl Maynard even.
Thunderbolt Patterson.
Well, they came later, but these were the guys in the late 50s, not T-Bone Patterson. He came a little bit later, and, he was huge. But Bobo, Art Thomas, Dory Dixon, and Sweet Daddy Siki, who was then a babyface, and then he transformed into sort of the African or a Canadian African version of Gorgeous George. And maybe Jonathan can talk about what a total legend that guy was. And he could sing. He cut a bunch of records. He had, was it a weekly gig at the club in somewhere in Toronto that he still was playing music up until his death?
Yeah. So he was born in. He's a native of Texas originally, and that factored into his gimmick through his whole life. He had that kind of accent that just, for working as a heel, just really broadcasted a certain kind of arrogance to it. And he, like you said, he worked as a face for many years once he broke into the business under the name Reginald Siki. He actually wasn't the first Reginald Siki either. There was another wrestler who went by that name who actually stole it from a boxer in the early 1920s. Who also used the Siki nickname. Battling Siki was that guy's name. But Sweet Daddy Siki ultimately became the preening, egotistical heel that we know after he hooked up with Buddy Rogers and basically appropriated a big part of Buddy Rogers' gimmick, to the extent that Stu Hart would later say that he basically was Buddy Rogers but black, which you can imagine, for working at first across the southern United States and into some parts of Canada as well, just turned into nuclear heat for somebody. Bleach blonde hair, which has become a trope used by everybody from Shelton Benjamin to the Natural Butch Reed to Jade Cargill today, basically iterated on a few really established, that preening, handsome bodybuilder, founded the line The Ladies' Pet and the Men's Regret, and just worked that gimmick as hard as he could, for basically until he retired in 1988. And he only retired because he happened to be on a tour of Eastern Canada, along with the formerly adorable Adrian Adonis and the Kelly twins, where two of them lost their lives in a tragic automobile accident. He stopped wrestling immediately following that.
Jonathan, he wasn't in the car wreck with them, though.
No, but he was. It was Dave Bearman McKinley who was running the tour. And there are plenty of, I wouldn't even say they were quite territories, but there's a number of promoters who basically run these shows in less densely populated areas of the country where transportation tends to be pretty rough, which is ultimately what did Adrian Adonis in. But he basically decided after that he wanted out, retired. He actually had put a band together. He's one of the first wrestlers to kind of write and sing his own theme music. Put out 3 country albums. Was a friend of Charlie Pride's. Put out a rock and roll album, and basically towards the end of his life, really up until COVID hit, had a weekly gig in the East End of Toronto, where he ran a karaoke evening. But he he was a fixture. He at one point operated a wrestling school with Ron Hutchinson, which is where Edge and Christian and Rhino and Beth Phoenix and a number of early 2000s, late 1990s, there was that glut of Toronto talent that kind of made its way into WCW and ECW and WWE. That's where a lot of that comes from. So tremendously influential as a performer, really developed a broad legacy within the business and was widely respected by other wrestlers and certainly by fans as well. Really approachable guy when he wanted to be. If I can plug Slam Wrestling.
Jonathan at times.
SlamWrestling.net has put together an incredible tribute to him, both straight up eulogy, and Greg Oliver, who runs the site, got to work with Sweet Daddy Siki. There was a movie that came out about his life in around 2017. I haven't been able to get a hold of it.
I saw it.
But Greg's credited as one of the writers for that. So he worked extensively with Siki and has a lot to say about his own feelings as well.
I was asking Jonathan to try to find. I have one of his sequin vests from Detroit Kobo, because from about, I guess, 1970 to 73, he would pop down when he wasn't working Maple Leaf Garden shows for the original Tunney. He'd come down to work for Chic in all over Michigan and Ohio. And he even managed some wrestlers too. He was one of the very first, even before Roddy Piper in LA, to wrestle. And then on the same card, he'd manage a small stable of heels. And he was, when I say cranky, because we all loved and respected him to death, I many times tried to get him to come down to Cauliflower Alley so we could honor him, give him a plaque, which I was part of the board then, even in the 90s, nagging him to come down. But he wanted to be flown down first class, and CAC wouldn't go for it. And so it was our loss at CAC not to honor this kind of pioneer. We should have gotten like an Iron Mike Mazurki Award for excellence, both in wrestling and then in another field, like film, TV, music, and he had done all of those things. He was, Jonathan, he was on some talk shows as well. I don't know if, I haven't read Greg Oliver's tributes or other writers up there, but it sounds great that they did justice to a guy of this caliber. Another guy we lost is Dax Jane, who was one of these latter day of the last 20 years of the NWA. He was both an NWA, I think, singles champion and then whatever the lower tier right underneath the NWA world title. He was one of those champs. And the only group I saw make mention of him with a little tribute video or photo was TNA. I'm not sure why nobody else is talking about that guy, but obviously Siki was the bigger name of somebody we lost.
Just a quick note on that. On Raw, the Viking Raiders actually wore the armbands with saluting Jack Stane.
Good. Evan, did you ever see Siki wrestle?
Me?
Yeah, you're still by
I'm not 100 years old. No, no, he was 91. He was 91.
I got to see him work at Kobo. He was a lot of fun. You know who stole his gimmick entirely with the mirror, looking at himself in the mirror? I know others like Gorgeous George did it, but the narcissist Lex Luger character, when he's looking at the big full-length mirror, I could only think of Sweet Daddy Siki and what he would say, because he never made it to Vince Jr.'s WWF, even though he worked on quite a few. At the same time, he was working for Fred Kohler in Chicago at Marigold Arena. He was working MSG shows for Vince Sr., part of that great grouping of the African Americans. So, much love to Sweet Daddy Siki, total legend.
And then I also wanted in the podcast to bring up that Evan's got news about his book and wanted to share that with all the fans here. So why don't you tell us about it, Evan?
It's a long, sad story. I finished this book literally 4 years ago, and my production guy has had some major health problems. He's not young. And finally, he threw in the towel, and he didn't die, but he just said, I'm too sick to finish this. So I contacted Kenny Casanova, and basically in 1 week, we've put this thing together and it's in great shape. And it's going to be out very shortly. And it's over 100 stories. It's called Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. And it's basically me telling my life in 100+ stories, juggling 3 different careers, teaching, filmmaking, and various things I've done in the wrestling business. And more importantly, honoring a ton of lost friends that, Mike has shared as well. Nikolai Volkov, Iron Sheik, Killer Kowalski. Oh God, Johnny Valiant. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I would say a third of the book attributes to lost friends and family. Gordon Scazzeri,
Tiger Khan.
Tiger Khan, of course, who campaigned with the Hearts up in Calgary. So I'm proofreading it 2 weekends in a row, and I'm reliving every death every time I proofread it. So it's a mixture.
But you had Lanny Poffo in there too, didn't you?
Lanny Poffo's in there, of course. I mean, Nicole Bass, Melissa Coates. Melissa Coates was at my wedding. Just one friend we've lost after another. And but there's a lot of humor in there as well. I didn't want to make it all grim. For example, on 9/11, 2003, not 2001, I'm getting on this little puddle jumper plane, 20-seater from Philly to New York with Johnny Valiant, and the pilot looks like Lee Van Cleef. He looks dangerous, the pilot, okay? And Johnny's looking at me, and I'm looking at Johnny. Johnny whispers, "Did you see this guy?" And it's 9/11, and it's like, it's 2 years after. It's fresh on everybody's mind. And we get on this plane, and we hit some turbulence, and we're both thinking, this is it. We're going down, So, there's some humorous stuff in there also. But 100+ stories. And I really got the idea from House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros, which is my favorite book, where she tells the life. She tells her family and her neighbors' stories in very short little vignettes. That's what I did with this book.
Well, that's really fantastic, and it's great that Kenny Casanova, who is a big friend of the program, was able to, get it done for you and get it out the door. And as I said, maybe it's a good thing I'm not.
Yeah, these books, I could see them in bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, and in small independent bookstores and everything.
It's not just wrestling. I met Muhammad Ali, Jimmy Carter, James Brown, Al Green. I mean, it's not just wrestling.
Yeah, no, but with all the deceased members of your book, I'm kind of glad that I'm not mentioned in it.
You'll be in the next volume.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna have to, buy extra life insurance.
Like Russ had major shoulder surgery, and then he had it was a kidney stone.
Yeah, in fact, it is literally 1 year to go that I had my surgery to have my kidney stone blasted out. I got reminded by Facebook that it's today is the 1 year anniversary. I played a bunch of rock and stone based songs to say how glad I was that I was 1 gram lighter that day, but it was a big gram difference.
I had kidney stones. It's horrible.
Yeah. Well, mine wouldn't come out, so
it's even more horrible.
Yeah. Well, to the expense.
I should have sent you a pill called Colon Blow.
Yeah. No, I don't think I needed that. I think
that's like a porno.
Sure.
That was a bit on Saturday Night Live. Either that or STV.
Yes, Phil Hartman. It was one of Phil Hartman's.
He didn't have a good end either.
No, but it wasn't his colon. But so Jonathan, tell us about
badly wrong end for Phil Hartman.
Yes, but Jonathan, tell us about your next article that you have coming up in Slam Wrestling.
So actually the one that I just came out, I think it was yesterday, is my end of year Golden Schwartz Award, which basically goes to the wrestler whose performance I like best, and I'm totally biased, and I'm allowed to do that because I have a column. Thanks. It basically, the winner was Drew McIntyre, who's just been on fire for the entire last year. And what I thought was most interesting, especially given some of the conversations that we've had today, is he basically starts the year on an absolutely insane, irrational, jealous campaign to win back the world title that he never truly fairly lost and never really had a proper run with it due to the pandemic. And this framed the entire first half of his year until WrestleMania. Then he switches gears and starts feuding over a Taylor Swift friendship bracelet. And both of these feuds, whether there's a title on the line or a far less valuable piece of jewelry, made for really, really, really interesting, really good matches often, and really compelling storylines.
I disagree. I thought it was silly. I thought it was silly, the whole friendship bracelet thing. I didn't get into it whatsoever. The third match in the cage was excellent.
It was instead of a title, they were fighting over that. It was kind of almost human interest, and they were tapping into the Taylors. You would have had to watch the TV. It was done well, and the payoff, him breaking it, and then didn't CM Punk shove the words from the friendship bracelet into Drew's mouth at the
Bruno Ivan Koloff friendship bracelet feud was much better.
I think it was a stupid feud, but it was over. It got over. So who am I?
I think
and frankly, the point is that whether it's a MacGuffin. It wouldn't have mattered ultimately if it was a friendship bracelet or a Fabergé egg or a bulldog that, Haku and Tama are leading,
or a colon
imaginary
blow tablet,
or a colon blow tablet, or Chief J Strongbow's headdress. Any of those things, it stands for the same thing that we talk a lot about, about how much titles matter. Here was a case where another object kind of took the stage.
It was like when the Undertaker really hot feud. When the Undertaker in the urn, was taken from him. And that, that was the source of his strength and all that stuff when, the WWE was still kayfabe.
I want you to know that when Spiros Arion made proud Italian Indian Jay Strongbow eat his feathers, I was very traumatized as a child, and I just now got out of therapy 50 years later. I'm okay now. Yes.
Yeah, but you still believe that Chief Jay Strongbow is a Native American. You don't want anyone telling you that he's an Italian from New York. But continue on, Jonathan, with why you gave Drew McIntyre your Schwartzy.
No, the Golden Schwartz.
Yeah,
I think Mel Brooks may have some copyright issues with you on the Golden, or maybe his Golden Schwartz.
No, he just say his Schwartz is bigger than mine.
Yeah. Well, it was first. It's older. It's definitely older than yours. But so
much like Space Mountain, oldest ride, longest line.
Yeah, but why else do you consider Drew having friendship bracelet feud notwithstanding? He did, as Evan said, that third cage match that he had with CM Punk was really a tremendous, maybe one of the best matches of the year, when you consider, overall the different matches of 2024. That might
and I would put his Mania match against Seth Rollins in the mix too. I mean, that was early in the year, obviously, but I think that as far as that match went and the story that it told and transitioning over to Damian Priest, which you have to imagine as a performer was not necessarily the easiest pill for him to swallow. Although that's something I always kind of wonder how wrestlers think about this stuff behind the scenes. The other thing is, for his work as a heel, I thought it was brilliant. He's become one of the few wrestlers who's been able to use social media really effectively in terms of building a feud and establishing his character. He doesn't, obviously I don't know the guy. He doesn't play dumb. a lot of heels tend to just get on screen and rant and rave, and they're just bad for the sake of being bad. I would argue that throughout the year, McIntyre has been the babyface in all of this because he's been consistently done wrong, and he can point to where he's been done wrong, and he's correct in what he's saying.
Exactly.
The fact that the audience just happens to be fickle and, support Jey Uso when 6 months ago Jey Uso was a villain sits wrong with some people. And I think that WWE is really starting to lean into that kind of it's that kind of shades of gray storytelling that Vince McMahon promised us back in the Attitude Era but never quite delivered on. But we see it now kind of with McIntyre, with Kevin Owens, in terms of him feeling betrayed by Cody Rhodes along similar lines. We're seeing it with the New Day as well recently. I mean, to me, it's a golden age for heels coming up.
Yeah, because Kevin Owens' rationale, he's completely right in everything he says. And you have to look back at Drew.
And he's Canadian, so he's obviously right.
Yeah. But CM Punk couldn't wrestle for all those months, but Drew, with the social media and the vignettes, he kept it alive without CM Punk being able to do anything. He kept that whole feud alive when they couldn't even touch. They couldn't wrestle.
And even when you had them in the ring, the back and forth kind of promos, McIntyre more than held his own against Punk, and Punk's a legendary talker. I mean, I bought what McIntyre was selling, and for the first time where Punk was in a feud, and I used to be a pretty big Punk fan, McIntyre swayed me, and it takes a lot to do that.
Yeah, no, he was great. Before we end, I want to also throw out just, I wouldn't say Drew was most improved. It maybe just his promos, because he's always been a great worker in ring. But Harley Cameron, real name Danielle Vidot, amazing the transformation. She was, a year ago, she was with that group doing some sort of a TMZ type thing and able to sing, but she's really fleshed out. Go watch the match she had with Thunder Rosa. She's been doing some amazing things besides the singing. I want to know, in that 12 Days of Christmas song that she was singing, what are those chibi stickers? Is that something, Jonathan, from Japan? What the hell is that? I emailed you. What are chiba stickers?
That I did not catch.
It's some kind of AEW merch she was singing about. She did the whole thing while playing acoustic guitar in support of herself. I think she was a standout for this year to the ending 2024. And she was born on this day in 1994. The day we're taping this, Harley Cameron was born. So happy birthday, AEW's Harley Cameron. Brilliant performer. Makes the show
I didn't get her anything. Anyway, guys, we're wrapping up for this week. So if you have anything to plug, go ahead. You already plugged your column, Jonathan, but you can plug Slam Wrestling if you want. And Evan, your book and your page, and anything you want to promote, Mike. Let's go ahead and throw it out there.
So slamwrestling.net, Wrestlers Court with Jonathan Schwartz. I'm giving my time over to Evan because he's got really good news to promote.
Evan Ginsberg's Old School Wrestling Memories over on Facebook. And like I said before, wrestling rings, blackboards, and movie sets will be out shortly. 100 plus stories, 300 plus pages. Worked on it for 4 years. And Mike will be pleased to know there's a piece on there on the Sam Muchnick convention that Mike did. And Killer Kowalski was up on the podium talking about sneaking Woody Strode into his room during Jim Crow, and Kowalski started crying. And you looked around that room, and all these legendary old school tough guy wrestlers.
Ernie Ladd was in that room. Ernie Ladd was in that room too.
Yeah, and it was very powerful, and that story's in there as well, and 100 other stories. So, yeah, look for it, folks. Appreciate your support, and yeah, Happy New Year. Happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year to everybody out there. It's been a tough couple of years, especially with COVID, and hopefully this year will be a better one for everybody.
And Mike, your thoughts?
Well, I do want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and We'll give out information as to where to purchase Evan's book when it comes out. And the book after that is the book we've been working on. So first Evan's book, and then our book on John Tolis. There'll be a lot of Chris Tolis.
From Canada.
Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Before the Hart family were, going through the whole Calgary, Ontario, Canada, the city and the province and the country, the Tolis brothers back in the late 40s were from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. So they kind of set that path. And in my opinion, the pillar of great heels from the television era, the Sheik, the original Sheik, Eddie Farhat, Killer Kowalski, and John Tolis, an amazing heel. If you can catch any of his 70s stuff, cutting promos, state-of-the-art promos with Freddie Blassie as the babyface in Los Angeles, that was the state-of-the-art stuff. And
Tolis used to call Bruno a spaghetti bender. That was strong words back in '74.
Fighting words.
Spaghetti bender.
Absolutely.
So much.
All right, guys, well,
Danny Siki, total beloved legend, and just a colorful, wonderful one of those greats that.
Let me say one last thing. Thank you to Slam Wrestling. Thank you to Brian Westcott, who did a list of about 50 wrestlers who died last year. And nobody covers it better than Slam Wrestling. They really care and they acknowledge, not just the biggest names, but a lot of the indie guys and historians and such. And,
yeah, they mentioned our friend Tony Jones.
It's a community. It's a wrestling community.
Nice. They did do a very nice write-up.
Tony Jones.
These guys who know nothing but reviewing Raw and SmackDown, should look at sites like Slam Wrestling that has a heart. It actually has a heart.
It's true. It's true. We value that very much. Anyway, guys, great seeing you all for the new year. We have a wonderful schedule of great shows coming up. So you folks out there, you don't want to miss the show this week, because if you miss something, you're going to miss some great stuff. Anyway, it's got some great shows. Great to have you guys. And we'll see you all more in the new year, everyone. Good night, everyone.